Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Trump team can't say where a plane full of immigrants disappeared to. Immigrants' attorneys say they were told they were being deported to South Sudan, but Trump's lawyers won't say where the plane is claiming everything is classified. From NewRepublic.com, and that the actual headline is Trump's deportation to South Sudan are more twisted than they seem. And that was supposed to buy CH4 locks. And yeah, personally, I don't think the U.S. should be undergoing all these mass deportations. I personally don't really care for a lot of the people who are probably getting deported. They're probably mostly thieves, thugs, and rapists. But just because that doesn't mean they shouldn't be entitled to due process. I would say everyone should have the right to due process, and these mass deportations seem to be going against that. And also, they're deporting so many people they don't even know. But they don't even seem to know where they're deporting them all to. There's Trump's lawyers that are saying it's classified, but I personally wouldn't be surprised if they don't even know where they're deporting them all to at this point. It's very much why people should be against a centralized government. Because they might do things at such a large scale that it's hard to keep track of, and this is definitely not an exception to that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have the U.S. government's budget last year in one chart, fiscal year 2024, from CH4 Locks, and that's cross post from the Data is Beautiful subreddit. Out of pocket, the U.S. deficit was $1.8 trillion last year, fiscal year 2024, federal budget, and then the total receipts were 4.92 trillion. Individual income taxes were 2.4 trillion. Payroll taxes were 1.7 trillion. Corporation taxes were 530 billion, and other was 253 billion. And then the total spending was 6.75 trillion. Social Security was 1.5 trillion. Healthcare, mostly Medicaid, was 912 billion. Net interest on debt was 882 billion. Medicare was 874 billion. Defense was 874 billion. Income security was 671 billion. Veterans was 325 billion. Education was 305 billion. Transport was 137 billion. And other was 311 billion. And personally, I think the libertarian position is you gotta cut taxes and you gotta cut spending, but it seems like only people, a lot of Democrats don't want to cut either, and a lot of Republicans just want to cut taxes. And I think if you want to cut taxes, that's fine. I personally think that's fine, but you do have to still make up the deficit of $1.83 trillion we have currently, and it's only probably going to get bigger as time goes on, and our national debt just keeps getting higher and higher till it reaches the near infinite levels. And that's my thought on that issue. Then we have Michael Monahan. Pete Hegseth said in February we're going to cut the $850 billion defense budget 8% a year. Now Donald Trump said it should be $1 trillion, and no one noticed this because, to quote Norm Macdonald, we are at war with the world, from posted by B. Hart Hari, and that's a cross post they made to the We the Fifth subreddit. And it just goes to show you how the government, they'll always talk about cutting stuff, especially when the Republicans are in there, but they'll never usually go through with it because they just will continue to piss away money like there's no tomorrow, and that won't change regardless of which branch of the uniparty is in power. People will say, oh, the Doge will cut everything. But the Doge, they didn't pass those spending cuts, and even then, those spending cuts were performatory at best. It's just that they might say they're going to cut stuff, but they never really will go through with it. And that's personally why I think the U.S. government is going to have to default on its debt at some point, and that's going to be a very scary day indeed. Then we have SCOTUS Opinion, Oklahoma Charter School Board versus Drummond, edited title from SupremeCourt.gov, hosted by Dr. Who 07. And it's a PDF of the peer cure judgment of the nuclear high court. Justice Barrett took no part in the consideration of decision of these cases. And personally, I think it was I think we need to keep church and state separate. I do think if people do want to have private religious charter schools, they should be able to, but I don't think they should be getting taxpayer dollars. I think if people want to give private religious charter schools money, they should be able to, but I don't think they should be forced to give them money if they don't want to, and that's what taxation is. Taxation is, you're forced to give money to things you might not support, and that's why, I'm personally against the taxpayer funding going to private religious schools. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Big Beautiful Bill effect on income gaps, supposed to provide help with eating it, and that's crosswords from the Data is Beautiful subreddit. The Big Beautiful Bill, the House Budget Reconciliation Bill is May 20th, 2025, effect on income groups. Source Penn Wharton Budget Model, Table 5. First quintile $0 to $17,000. Now they would be the percent change in after tax and transfer income would be down 13.6%, minus 940. The second quintile, 17,000 to 51,000, that would be minus 580. Third quintile, that would be plus 815. And then the fourth quintile would be plus 3,075. And the fifth quintile would be, depending on where you are, from 5,795 all the way up to 390,310 in extra, I think, taxes paid. And yeah, that's another problem after Republicans. They usually only just seem interested in cutting taxes for the rich and never the poor. And I personally think if you want to cut taxes, you should be cutting them for everyone, not just the rich. And you shouldn't force the poor to pick up the slack, which is what they always seem to be doing, like they're doing here. The first and second quintile you pay less taxes, but in all the other quintiles you pay more taxes. And I don't think that's very libertarian. I think the libertarian position is no one should be forced to pay taxes if they don't want to. You should give a tax cut to everyone who wants one, rather than just those in the top quintiles. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Texas versus NH Libertarians, posted by Agent of Dallas, and that's a screenshot of a tweet. Polling USA, Texas Libertarians versus New Hampshire Libertarians. And the Texas Libertarian side is, I want gay married couples to be able to protect their marijuana plants with guns. And the New Hampshire Libertarian side is, I am Adolf Hitler. And that was, I think, Adolf Hitler, one of his verses in Epic Battles of History. And that was them, quote, replying to a tweet from Classical Liberal Caucus, being gay shouldn't be a crime. And yeah, personally, I think the libertarian position is more just support individual rights. So I'd agree more with the Texas libertarian position than the New Hampshire libertarian position, I would say. But then again, I think the New Hampshire libertarians, I don't really think they're Hitler. I think they just like to get on people's goat and get a reaction. I think it's kind of like Kanye West. He has that new song out, Hail Hitler. And, I don't think he's actually a Nazi. Maybe he thinks he's a Nazi. I don't know. I don't know if you can really get in Kanye's head at this point. But regardless, I think a lot of people who are self-proclaimed Nazis on social media really just want attention rather than, anything else. And yeah, I personally don't really care for it, but it's the internet. People are going to edgelord and shitpost. That's kind of how it's been for decades at this point. And yeah, if you want to do that, I personally don't care for it. Sometimes I might do it a little lightly, but if you want to do that, you should be able to do that. But just be aware that might not be good for your brand. And that's my thought on that issue. Then we have Democrats push to strip Trump of authority over police agency that protects judges as threats against judges surge. From CBSNews.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I personally don't think the judges should have their own police agency. And so I personally think the libertarian position is, we shouldn't have any police. People need to police themselves and govern themselves rather than have the state do it for them. But with that being said, I think one centralized police agency is good enough. We shouldn't be having specialized police agencies for just judges. And yeah, if the Dems want to strip Trump of his authority over them, I personally don't think they should even be existing in the first place. That's my thought on a lot of government. The Democrats and Republicans will say we need to get the Democrats will say we need to strip the authority from the president, and the Republicans will say we need to strip the authority from the president. Well, I will say, when it doesn't really matter who the president is. You gotta work on strengthening the state regardless of which branch of the Uniparty is in power. Then we have unidentified Trump henchmen waiting to assault people outside courtroom from CH4 Locks, and that's a cross post from the Blue Sky Steeds subreddit, and that's a tweet from, it's a Blue Sky post from Sharon. Really don't like how every Fed line is Trump is masked now, and she was quote, blue skying or quote tweeting, I guess, it's pretty much Twitter. Here's a picture of that QUOW photograph you can see out yesterday, showing the ICE officers masked up in the hallways as they waited to arrest people coming out of their hearings. And yeah, personally, I do think a lot of feds do wear the masks. Like, they keep they look kind of like this. These, like, their shirts kind of like as masks. I think that's what these kind of guys look like. But, they're only saying these guys are Trump-backed feds because it's sports narrative. When the Patriot Front marches, whenever that happens, those were feds probably too, but they would never admit those are feds, even if they have the same type of federal masked face covering. And that's my thoughts on that issue, People will only just say whatever goes along with the narrative these days. They won't ever question the narrative, even if, that they contradict themselves on multiple occasions, like they're doing here. If these guys are masked are fed, but the guys who are pretty much wearing the same masks for the Patriot Front aren't feds. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.